Welcome back, everybody, to another fantastic episode of Hello, this is Chance Paladin, and I'm going to talk to you and get comfortable, and hopefully the cats don't make too much noise. So I am going to ramble a lot, and if you're not used to that by now and you just want to click away, go for it. So a lot of people ask for podcast kind of style stuff, and also a lot of people asked if I would narrate the bunker book for people, which I tried to tell everybody, like, it doesn't really work that way. Why isn't it on Kindle? Well, because nobody's going to read it on Kindle, and somebody's just going to rip it off. So, and then it'll be free, and then it'll kind of feel like a waste to me, because I worked really hard on this book. And honestly, like, there are some preppers that throw a bunch of stuff on an SD card and then throw it in a Faraday bag and throw it in their bunker or whatever. But if this is just lumped in with like 10,000 other nameless, faceless documents, and then, you know, the SAS handbook and the booby traps book or whatever, like all those, a certain cookbook of origins, the real one, not the fake one. Like, people are going to go read those books if, you know, they already think they know everything, because those are like the advanced sexy books. And then beginners probably won't have even got that far to begin with, and they won't necessarily know, you know, I need to go find, I should actually be putting this in the book somewhere. By the way, somewhere. I better keep notes as I go. So bear with me here. Out of my notepad. Whoops, that's not it. So this, write this down before I forget. Look for SD cards in mother bags or Faraday boxes or some such to put them in a tablet. Maybe there's a bunch of survival literature on there. Some preppers keep their prepper libraries that way, so they're more portable than books. And I'll give you a for instance. First of all, in the hardbound version of this, I'm also calling it the director's cut. I think there's going to be like a lot more stories, since it's a book, and you'd theoretically have like a million years. You could just read through the stories if you wanted, and if you didn't want to, you didn't want to. But there was this book, I believe it was called Lucifer's Hammer, which is it is an amazing, like, prepper apocalypse book. But the title of the book doesn't really help you. Blah. Whoops. Kind of like the stand. I keep smacking my mic. Boom. Someday when things work out better, I'm getting a new mic and a new mic boom, and hopefully I won't smack this thing for a loop anymore. So, yeah, Lucifer's Hammer. But there was a part where, like, the super smart guy takes all the chemistry books and puts them in something, you know, that he could go retrieve them later, and it was a big plot point to the story. Nowadays, a lot of preppers, for their own, you know, their own ways of, like, rebuilding society, just collected tons and tons of books on PDFs. All totally legal, of course. Not that it would matter when the world is over with, but it's kind of one of those funny things. Me personally, besides the aforementioned issue I had with it, which is newbies aren't going to know to do that. So, okay, there's like one strike against it. The other thing is that PDF scans of books are notoriously hard to read. Just throwing that out there. So, unless you've actually tried to go back through and read some, all totally legal, of course, for backup purposes. If you've ever tried to go back and read those, some of them pretty easy to read. Some of them borderline impossible, and massively headache inducing, I might add. And I don't know why that is, because I've never tried scanning a book before, and so I have no idea what that entails. But somebody somewhere thinks it's really important, either for backing things up or, I don't know, preservation. I think all books should be backed up and scanned, but if there's any like surviving members left, I feel like there should be a way to send them money. But that goes kind of back to this really long piracy discussion and how the blockchain could fix all of our problems. Anyway, that's why I don't have this on Kindle. I don't think it'll help newbies, and this book is really for newbies. And so I think it needs to be in print. And plus, this book's really designed for people to correct things that I screwed up, correct things that don't work, and leave a lot of their own notes. And I guess the final like preliminary thing I'll say about this book is that everybody who's a newbie that has read it so far has had really positive things to say about it. People that seem to lean more towards they're already squared away and they already know what they're doing, I think they find the book obnoxious because they want to read prepper books that are like at a higher level, or a more, I want to say, academic level. And I think there's a happy middle ground. I just probably won't ever reach it in my lifetime, but especially with the battery part, extension cords, solar panels, solar generators. One of the last big update I did, I wasn't going to do anymore, and I know I said that a million times, but I finally found somebody who was as good at off-grid battery stuff as I was, if not a little bit better. And he tests it way more than me. He kind of put everything that I wrote to the test, and in my opinion, it was all fine. He just didn't like the way that I wrote it, and admittedly, there was way more redundancy than I intended, and that's just because if I'm not careful and taking a lot of breaks, I end up writing in circles. So, and the big takeaway though is the formulas were right, but how I wrote them was not, like, I want to say, academically correct. And I think that is a big deal. And I didn't take any shortcuts when I wrote the formulas, but I didn't realize how my formulas would be interpreted. And so anyway, I rewrote all my formulas. They were right, but I wrote them with the more correct symbols. So he took a long time to read through that, and went nuts for a bit, but then I think he calmed down and realized why it was written the way it was written, and we ended up finding like a really good middle ground there. So most of the rest of this I don't think is as important to get like high speed levels of like prepper ready. Even on this like director's cut, it's just not going to get there. And there's a lot of things still that I don't know. Like, one example I'll throw out there, if someday I ever get popular enough and somebody reads through this, like, I'm more than happy to update the book now that I'm working on a director's cut version. One question I have is like propane, like talking about the little green canisters, propane tank down versus propane tank up. I've never completely understood that, and I don't know if it's the same for you computer folks out there as it is when you're water cooling a computer and you have the water cooling at the top versus the water cooling loop at the bottom. And the way I understand it, having your water cooling looped at the bottom is good because you eliminate all the bubbles. And I thought that's why you're supposed to have your propane tanks, your little green propane tanks, down instead of up. But I swear I've read some places for some products, you actually want your green propane tank up instead of down. And so I think I probably couldn't repeat this enough times unless I literally put it at the beginning of every chapter, which is like, hopefully if you do find a bunker, like let's pretend somebody records this and puts this audio in a bunker someday and it's the end of the world and we didn't make it because the balloon people took over or whatever. Hopefully in your bunker somebody had the wherewithal to save all the manuals for everything, and that you're able to have the knowledge, skills, and whatever the A stands for, knowledge, skills, and actions? No. Activity? No. Whatever it is, whatever the A stands for. KSA, knowledge, skills, abilities. There we go, thank you. I'm saying thank you to myself, but that's okay. Hopefully you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to put into context whatever it is you're reading, because my same electrical friend that I'm talked about looked at 3 different manuals from the same damn radio, and they had like 3 different sets of instructions on how to, I believe it was, store the batteries. Me and him have talked a lot about storing batteries, and one of the reasons why, I know I haven't even started reading the book yet, but this isn't me reading through the book. This is me doing a podcast about my bunker codes. We couldn't reach a consensus, even from like manual to manual of the same manufacturer, of how to store batteries, like even for just one radio. So storing batteries is written like really vague in a way that I think will work, which is if it's about half at like 6 months, and then you check it, charge it back up, whatever. I think generally speaking, you're going to be okay. And if they're smaller, like milliamp hour batteries, using night cores, I think you're going to be okay most of the time. If you have the manual of whatever battery you're trying to use, that would be better. We could find no consensus on how to store batteries. I don't care what anybody says. Check the manuals and then use your knowledge, skills, and whatever the A was. I already forgot again. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with that. But that was that. Oh, there's so much misinformation on the internet. I ran into a lot of stuff that was flat out wrong. There was one thing that I wish I could do even better, which is like food storage. A lot of people say water's the most important besides oxygen, and yes, Southern Pepper One just said that earlier today. Like, water is the most important thing in the world except for oxygen. And then obviously you've got, food, shelter, safety, da 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 da. I wish I had more in here about food preservation, because that was another part that was extremely hard to write about, because there's so much hyper detailed ways of preserving every single itty bitty different piece of kind of food. And I don't just mean like, oh, throw it in a Mylar and there you go for 30 years. Like, which things need oxygen absorption versus which things need moisture absorption, which things can handle both a moisture and an oxygen. There's a million websites with misinformation on that. It is horribly frustrating. What to do about bugs being in your food preps. I would love to do way more about that, especially since now, as it stands in the year of our Lord 2023, also well known as infamy as like probably the worst year ever, because every year now is the worst year ever, but I digress. Bug paste and bug flour, specifically cockroaches, but probably other things. I want to say weevils. I can't remember what it is, but there's some Survival Living was talking about it again the other day, and I wish I could ask him, like, could you please do a whole video on just like bugs in food? There was a lot of stuff that I didn't want to talk about in this book, because the last thing I wanted everybody to do is just start gagging. But there's bugs in all your food. This is not me excusing having bug paste and bug flour and everything. Quite the contrary. I want you to be aware of it. And I wish I could have raised awareness better in my book. But the reason why I said like the year, this is only February of 2023. A lot of the acronyms they use for bug paste and bug flour, I still don't completely understand it. I haven't had a lot of time to look into it yet. Southern Pepper One's been talking about it a lot. Survival Living's been talking about it a lot. And I want to say maybe Alaska Prepper's been talking about it a lot too. I don't agree with eating bugs or bug paste. Bug flour. I don't agree with it. However, you should be aware of it. And you should also be aware that even if you buy your favorite brand of canned food that you love and you hold in high regard and you live vicariously through this brand of food, there is a chance that there is going to be some extremely disgusting things in those cans of food, and I won't say what they are, that will make you never, ever, ever want to eat. Actually, you won't want to eat for days afterwards because you'll be so disgusted. However, when you're starving, you're not going to care. You do need to be aware of allergies, though. And if you pull something out of your food that you don't want to eat, don't go crazy and throw all your food away. You'll get over it. You just won't want to eat for a couple days. I've also been worried a lot about food recalls. There was another just massive beef food recall the other day. Thankfully, like, the window was really short, but the amount of brands was like huge. Obviously, you won't, just talking about like food preps, you won't be able to gauge any of that after the apocalypse. And I don't particularly know what to do about it. And that's why I keep falling back to, like, if you open up a can of food and something doesn't seem right about it, you're going to have to just trust your instincts and not eat it. There's so many, like, different food illnesses. You don't want to risk it. I don't know what to do about it necessarily either, but yeah, and I didn't write a lot about that. Yeah, I don't know. I'll take a break here and rest my voice. I'm not doing this live, by the way. I wanted to do a live, but this is also helping me gather my thoughts. So it's been the 20-minute mark. I'm going to pause it really quick and rest my voice. So yeah, let's see. Where was I? I didn't talk a lot about the Rona because I wasn't really sure how long that was going to be a thing for, but I do notice in there, I bring up elderberry and zinc, and I almost feel like that should be the go-to from now on. If you have an itchy throat, just take elderberry, zinc, vitamin C. There's probably a couple other things too. And just kind of really hope for the best. One of the interesting things is that almost all the cold medicine's gone from the stores again for like the millionth time. So I really suggest, if you are building your own bunker, your own farm, your own garden, you've got to get some elderberry bushes and learn how to take care of them. I can't see, how much did I? Yeah. I don't know if I talk as much about pruning. I do a little bit, though. I think over and over, I'm really surprised at how much I covered. And quite a few people, to be honest, like quite a few people have read this book now. And I have a couple reviews on Amazon, but I really don't know if people are getting like a lot of little helpful ideas or if they kind of like cling on to one thing. But there is so much information in this book. It's seriously like 20 plus, adult years in the making, plus my entire childhood of camping and Boy Scouts. Like, I wish there was more hunting and fishing in here. I just was not exposed to hunting and fishing very much. Like, I've cleaned chickens, just not a lot. I've just never quite, it's just like with everything else. I'm always kind of like stuck right in the middle, where I learn like just enough stuff to keep going, but I've never really been like all in on anything, quite frankly. I've never had to. I've never been forced to like completely, thoroughly specialize in something. And I still feel like that's kind of the way to go. Like, specialization, I forgot where I wrote this or where I said this, and it's in one of my books though, but like, specialization is a good way to not survive. And likewise, they say in martial arts, or Bruce Lee or somebody said it, don't worry about the person who's like practiced a ton of kicks a little bit. Worry about like the one guy who like practices like just like the one kick all day long, because that's the one that's going to get you. It's kind of the same way with like specializations. If you're up against somebody else with a specialization, they have a huge advantage over you if they get to choose the circumstances. If they don't get to choose their circumstances, their specialization could be a real hindrance. Or if it's in something that proves to not add value to their specific survival situation. Like, there's people that I'm sure are really good stockbrokers. Or there's people that get lots of gold and silver and stuff. If that's the only thing they do, it's only going to help them in a very narrow set of circumstances, and they're gonna struggle. And you might think, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Go on. What that has to do with is there's a lot of homesteaders that are only homesteaders, and they think the good old boys are going to protect them, and nobody will try that here, and it's not true. Like, in the Pacific Northwest, the rural areas were not immune from civil conflict. The rural communities had to fight for it. The fights came to their towns. A lot of these like more conservative areas in the Midwest, they think they're magically insulated, and they aren't. All of the rural communities in the Pacific, every single one almost, had to fight to maintain 2016 through 2021, I want to say. Like, the rural communities, between the stupid fires and the civil unrest, have been embroiled in a civil conflict in the Pacific Northwest for like 5 years, but more than that now. And you know, I wish I could write about that more, but like, it's another one of those things like dealing with mobs. If you haven't ever been in a mob, you don't know what you don't know. I'm not going to say you're stupid. But if you speak without knowing what you're talking about, then you are stupid. But you don't know what you don't know. People need to admit that they don't know what they don't know. They won't, though. That's the problem. And a lot of those people will freeze. And a lot of those people are homesteaders. They have normalcy bias. They're used to nobody coming to their house. Come on. They're used to nobody coming up to their door. They're not used to like meth heads being able to walk 20 or 30 miles a day. And I want to say Warrior Poet he's got tons of good videos, but one of his best videos was he had an incident. I thought for sure. I'm going to be really bummed if I don't have him in my references. I was positive. What if I have him as something else? Hold on. Oh shoot, that link broke. Okay, I gotta fix that. I'm gonna have to pause. This. Heavy 88. ASP, per bunker, Shaman, Monster, Granite, Last Prepper, T-Rex, Rowley, Bush Radical, Steve Wallace, Seed Prepping, How the hell is Warrior Poet not in here? That's really, really weird. I watch his dang videos every day. Okay. Well, I'm going to pause this really quick and add Warrior Poet. And then fix this solar power link. I kind of had to do like a merge thing because my files got out of sync. So fix that link, and then I want to talk about Warrior Poet some more. BRB. All right. So yeah, John Lavelle, Warrior Poet Society on YouTube, had one of those situations where I think he thought he was far enough out. Either that or he didn't know there was a camp nearby. I can't remember, but these damn homeless camps pop up everywhere. Everywhere. And yeah, meth head, if I remember right, if I remember the story right, like a meth head showed up basically, and they were not quite prepared. He did okay though, because he had the tactics, the mindset. Everything turned out okay, but it could have been a million times worse, and he had some really good takeaways from that. Excuse me. And there's a lot of homesteaders that do not have the mindset, training, tactics, tools to deal with that. They think that this persona of we're good old boys, shut the hell, it's so stupid. They think that magically protects them, and it doesn't. And so them specializing in farming and raising chickens is great until it's not. Until their normalcy bias becomes a hindrance. Because they want to help people while being secure first. They want other people to secure them, and then they want everybody to orbit around their farm to protect them. Unfortunately, and this is another thing I don't talk about in here, and I kind of want to have a section about leadership, but I kind of don't. Leadership is weird in a way that when everything is nice and peaceful, you have one set of leaders. Most of those people make garbage leaders when the shit hits the fan. The people typically that get you into a conflict, most of those people will not be able to get you back out. Because they hadn't thought it through, and they don't have an adaptable enough amount of tools and knowledge and experience in their toolbox to get you back out. Which is why, again, another John Lavelle Warrior Poet video. I think this one was just from the last few days. It's why he said, if you run into a mob, just throw the car in reverse, break contact, get out of there. He is one of the only people I have ever heard say that. And I was so relieved. And he's got a lot of military experience. Yes, you could theoretically fight through if you have no other options, but if you have the awareness, active self-protection talks about that too. If you have the awareness, just get out. And that's how you can really tell a lot of the fakes and a lot of I want to call them peacetime leaders. You can tell them the difference between them and I want to say wartime leaders. And a lot of these homesteaders for lack of better, I don't want to call them like rednecks or hillbillies. I struggled with that a lot when I wrote my book series, but these rural communities, this insulated mindset that they have translates horribly, in this transition period that we're in right now, but also B, it translates horribly into what I'll call like wartime, or whatever the opposite of peacetime is. You know, calling the cops on like a meth head that's on your property. Okay. But like, you have to be able to spot them in time, get everybody in the house. Your house has to be reinforced. Safe rooms, maybe. The tools have to be available, and the tactics. You know, do you have cameras? Do you have ways to see them? Are there blind spots? Are you gonna have somebody in your family has a bleeding heart that's gonna want to go save them, even though you don't have any like night cam or whatever, and they're convulsing and they could attack you, and they can bite your face off. So so let's pretend, you know, you're these homesteaders now, and you know a security team has decided to orbit around your property. As long as you give them a bunch of pumpkin bread, and they'll defend your property. Unfortunately, a lot of these homesteads still have that peacetime Southern charm BS when like the ship sailed. Like, there's meth zombies running around. There has been for years. I'm sorry, but taking them in and giving them 3 hots and a cot and a hot cup of coffee doesn't cure them of being a meth zombie. And I don't know what does. I don't know how long withdrawals take, and what if it's like something else? What if it's not meth? What if they're there to steal all your shit? What if they're there as a scout or you know, a penetration you know, tactic? You don't know. And when you have to constantly fight the mindset of your own team, either you don't have a strong enough personality, or you have somebody who's trying to make everybody happy. I personally wouldn't hinge my plans on orbiting around a homesteader. And if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, it's because I was talking about specialization. A lot of these homesteaders are just way too specialized on farming and gardening and making 10 million children, which is great. But like, they never worked on like what their mindset's going to have to be, because they're all this bluster and posturing, and that doesn't work. The people that are getting hard, the people that are getting tough and forging their mindset are people that were either like in the military, or you know, some kind of law enforcement, some kind of first responder, or people that have just been living, dealing, working, and interacting with the cities for the last, I want to say, since 2005, 2006, maybe 2007. Whenever Zimmerman happened, George Floyd, that was 2006, 2007. Unless you're in the WTO riots, or unless you're in the LA riots. I mean, there's some people that are definitely alive. That, I mean, the LA riots weren't that long ago. When I was doing my community response training, volunteer training, one of the guys in our class was a police officer in the LA riots. He wasn't that much older than I was. The LA riots were not that long ago. WTO was not that long ago. Like, it just Zimmerman was not long ago, and George Floyd was not long ago, and this just keeps happening and happening and happening. Well, meanwhile, you got these people in their little towns. Well, that can't happen here. Oh, bullshit, it can. And your two cops aren't going to do anything about it. Like, that's the whole point of, like, the militia being able to defend your town, especially in cities where it takes 3 days to mobilize the National Guard and their base is on the other side of the state. And oh, by the way, they don't have any guns or ammo, and they're just going to show up with batons and do their best, like. And likewise, specializing in just tactics and tools and gear and, like, Prepper Bunker Outdoors, it's like, talking about nods, it's like, are nods cool? Yes. But there's about a million things you need to get first, like training. Putting on nods isn't going to help you if you don't have everything else first. And I always like how he calls it you're a walking loot drop. And I always love that so much. He has such a funny way with words. But you think about it and you're like, holy cow. Like, the dude knows his shit. And I know I'm just like a nobody. And I watch a lot of YouTube. And I know, like, I have camping videos. I just keep them private. And I just share them with my friends. I can do a lot of this stuff. I just don't telegraph it. I just talk about it. Because that's my comfort level. Because I don't need to show off. I know I wasn't in the military or law enforcement, but I'm trained multiple different ways as a first responder. For volunteer, but I'm trained 2 years with 2 different groups. I've done a lot of stuff and I've seen a lot of stuff. I just wasn't in the military. There's a lot of military people that poo-poo non-military people, which is fine. However, spending your entire life in the military doesn't always help you for domestic civil conflict when you can't call in an airstrike or get your 240 Bravo out. So, I hope I said that right. I'm like... Oh boy. Yeah, I said that right. Okay. I don't know why I'm like blah 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 looking at the time, and it's been 20 minutes, so I'm gonna rest my voice again so I don't get too crackly. All right. I think the last thing I wanted to talk about is gaps, because Southern Prepper 1 was talking about this balloon thing. And if it had been an EMP, which it would have been in the perfect spot to EMP us all. He was talking about how good his preps were. I mean, he wasn't bragging about how good his preps were. I mean, he was reflecting on how their status. And he was not implying that they were good or that they were up to his standards. And he said he was going to do a full review on that tomorrow. And I'm really excited because I want to remind everybody Southern Prepper 1 was the consultant for Doomsday Preppers. And so it'll be really interesting for him to rank himself in EMP. And so I want to talk about gaps because I think there's a couple. I think I personally have a couple. One of them is fitness. I'm not as healthy as I want to be, but I've made tremendous gains on that. It's something I'm constantly working on. One of those things is not blowing my voice out. Which is why I'm taking breaks every 20 minutes. So, but I mean, the nice thing about that is that's something I'm going to use whether it's the apocalypse or not. And I already feel a million times better. and I'm actually like working on my shoulder a lot because I blew my shoulder out somehow about 2 months ago. So I'm working on that, and it's almost better. And yeah, a couple health things, but they're all things that I can work on. I don't think I have like as much stuff in Faraday cages as I could, because at some point it kind of wasn't a priority to me anymore. A lot of the stuff that I would put in my Faraday box that I made, I already use all the time. So it's kind of annoying for me to have to get things in and out of the Faraday box. I feel like that's especially useful to preppers who have like 2 of everything, or 3 or 4 of everything, and so they're not using, and batteries is like an example. You're not using your batteries every day because you have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7 sets of batteries. There's YouTubers that have 10, 20 like big batteries, and I'm not poo-pooing on them. I'm saying like they should put some of those in Faraday boxes, and some of them do, and some of them have the EMP shield or whatever. None of this is me dogging on the fellow YouTubers that I look up to. I'm using it as an example for like why I don't have everything in boxes, because I only have 1 and or 2 and 3 or 4 like our little like 10, 20,000 like milliamp hour batteries. We use those like all day, every day. Me and my wife do, because they're just so useful for just everything. Where's I going with that? So the second problem with like putting all your batteries in Faraday boxes is they do need to breathe. You're not supposed to seal them up, just like you wouldn't seal up a generator. You wouldn't seal up batteries too. They do need oxygen. They do breathe. And then thirdly, like I was talking about at the beginning of the show, you still need to be like exercising them. So even, YouTubers with tons of batteries or whatever, a lot of those YouTubers use those batteries all the time because they're already living like partially off grid anyway. Even like Linus Tech Tips, which I don't think is in my references, because probably 99% of preppers, again, going back to like specialties and stuff, most of them don't know anything about computers, don't do anything with them, except for some of like the off-grid like crypto miners. A lot of them are like preppers too, and they off-grid crypto mine, or at least they used to. So they're like in the Venn diagram of schemes, there are some overlaps there, but Linus Tech Tips had an outage right in the middle of their big podcast for the week. And excuse me, and the staff just brought out tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of Jackeries, because Jackery was their sponsor and just kept sending them more Jackeries, and they just plugged in all their Jackeries and turned the show right back on. And so so even if they're not prepper YouTubers, like a lot of those YouTubers with all those batteries really are exercising them all the time. So putting them in Faraday boxes doesn't really help them either, because they're using them and they give a lot of them away, or they donate them to keep their local communities prepped up, which is all fine. I mean, they're a bitch to ship anyway. They weigh way too much to affordably ship anywhere. My friend had to ship one back to repair it. Had to be on a pallet. It was a bitch. So keeping like let's pretend I was a big YouTuber and I was sponsored by every single battery manufacturer out there. I wouldn't be shipping them to people either. I would be using them or donating them locally, because they're just too expensive to ship. And you're really wearing out those like USPS folks, those FedEx and those UPS, FedEx, USPS. You're really wearing them out by having them ship big batteries around all the time. And so even for the bigger YouTubers, it doesn't make sense to have their batteries in Faraday boxes, I think. It is a real hassle. Probably that would be like where an EMP shield kind of product would work. I don't know how you'd build all that in line, but like Energy, for example, has an EMP shield product built for it. And if you're wondering, what the hell are you talking about? I'm talking about like gaps in my preps. I think you can do like Faraday boxes and bags for like your radios and your flashlights. But I've got a bunch of flashlights. I've got one in every bag. I'm not taking all those flashlights out, putting them all in a bag, and then getting them all back out again. Like, it doesn't make sense. So anyone who is like super, super concerned with EMPs, I'd really be interested to see, unless they've got tons of spare flashlights, how the heck they and batteries, how they function. I use my batteries and my flashlights all the time. So that's, if there's an EMP, which is very really possible, these dumb balloons floating around, I wouldn't have very much stuff protected, to be perfectly honest, and that kind of sucks. Boopity 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 boop. The other thing I think is a big weakness, that I would say all preppers have, and this balloon thing is only like the most recent example. As civilians, we're allowed to own a lot of things: armor, drones, night vision, 3D printers. There's a lot of cool things. I'm probably missing a few radios. There's a lot of cool things that we can own as civilians. I feel like one of the biggest gaps preppers have, you can have thermal, you can have, night vision, you can have lasers like within reason, within, safe parameters. But like, we don't have radar. And we, encrypted comms, that's like another problem altogether, and there's some workarounds there. That's a lot of a gray area for encrypted comms. But we can't or we don't have radar, and I don't know why that is. And with this blimp thing, but most recently, like, man, when we first moved in, our roommates got this place, and we first moved in, we had drone problems a lot. There was some idiot neighbor was just very, very reckless with his drone. He always wanted in our backyard to look for his drone, because he never knew whose yard it was in. And I personally was outside one time when this thing fell from a very high altitude and hit the neighbor's car maybe 15 feet away from me, I want to say. It was like a rock coming out of the sky. It wasn't a small drone. And I'm not saying drones should be banned, or that there needs to be any really drone regulations at all. I'm mostly for deregulation, and people will sort it out. But I feel like radar, and I don't know what concerns with the FCC and planes and stuff, so I don't know anything about that. So if it's illegal, I apologize. I just don't know. I don't have a radar. I'm just saying I feel like that's one of those things that's a gap. It could be obnoxious if everybody had radars and if that was distracting pilots all the time. I have no idea. You can have your own little weather stations, though, but I don't know how invasive that is. So That's like my one weakness for myself, which is like EMP stuff. I mean, EMP protection stuff. People don't go down the rabbit hole of making your own EMPs. I think that is a horrible idea. I do not support people making their own EMPs. It's just weird. Same thing with like jammers. I don't support people making jammers unless you own a business and you have excuse me, business, and you have the commercial laws behind you to operate one. I don't support signal jammers, don't support EMPs. But so I don't know like where in there that radar falls. I know that really powerful radios can really screw up planes and stuff, or at least they used to be able to, so a lot of it just falls into people being good human beings, and if you're going to be on the radio, get your ham license, because there's a lot of really helpful educational stuff in there. A lot of your ham license is telling you, educating you how to be a good ham. And if there was something like that for radar, that would be cool, because I think radar is a big gap. And I know radar can be a liability too, but because people know that you're beaming them with the radar. I don't know. And I think that's it for my first episode of the Bunker Codes podcast. And I know I didn't get into the book itself, but that's because this is not me reading through my book. I'm not going to do that. I don't think that would help anybody. This is going to be picking little nuggets out of my book that I want to talk about. That it doesn't quite make sense for me to write in the book because it's more long form content. So, and people wanted me to read the book, which that doesn't help anybody, and then it wouldn't help anyone if this went in the book, because I don't know quite what to do or say about it, but this is exactly the middle ground that I found for long form podcasty type comments. So if you like this one, and if you want me to do more, please let me know down in the comments below. If you disagree or agree, or if you've read the Bunker Codes and there's something in it that you liked that you want me to expand on, or if you think I'm wrong and there's something I need to fix. First of all, thank you for reading it with a kind, open heart. And also, I'm happy. I don't think there's any like grievous errors. But if there's something you want me to add in the hardbound director's cut, let me know, because I want to add a lot more context. It's not going to be a lot more advanced stuff. I want to add a lot more context to the hardbound, which is why I'm calling it the director's cut. So anyway, this is it for the Bunker Codes podcast number 1. And read my books, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye.